It was there all along. The first Sunday we started this series, we talked about when the spinning stops and discussed chaos and confusion. Last week we talked about the flying monkeys and that the best defense is a good offense. Today we look at the tin man who had a little heart, wasn't even sure, wasn't even aware it was there all along. Every now and then in life we'll feel like something's missing, even the physical things. And you get in the car and all of a sudden you realize you're halfway to work or somewhere and you realize you forgot your phone. It just kind of came over you at that moment. Or maybe it's your sunglasses that you left somewhere and you forgot them and you just now become aware. What happens in relational areas in our lives as well, where we're walking through and the life skills we have at our fingertips are not quite what we think we should have. They're not what we would like to have. And something is a little bit missing. Who are we looking for in this picture? Waldo. He's there. I'll show you in a minute. I tried to find him, but we had to do a group project at home to really locate him. But sometimes in life it feels like that's what our life is like, that we're trying to walk through life day by day, and we know there's something a little bit missing, but trying to find it is like looking for Waldo. There he is, right there. We're looking for something that we might be missing. There's a common dream that many people have that I've read about, and I've had this dream before. You show up for work or you're at school or somewhere, and all of a sudden you realize that you're naked. Something's missing. And every now and then in relationships, we feel that exposed. We feel that vulnerable. How do we respond to that? What are we to do to find those pieces that are missing? Well, today we're going to take a look at the Gospel of Luke and a story that we're probably familiar with, but I think bears much more scrutiny. Let me set the stage. Jesus had been teaching some of the followers, and the crowd got bigger and bigger, and finally was at the shores of Lake Gennesaret, and he looks around and he sees a couple of boats, and he crawls into one, and Simon Peter's boat. He said, "Let's go out from the shore." So Peter takes him out from the shore, and he's in the boat, and Jesus teaches the crowd. And everybody's listening and paying attention, and they're all gathered around. And here's where we pick up the story. When he finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boats, "Come and help them." And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' feet and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. They had witnessed an amazing miracle, but keep in mind, these were fishermen. These were experts. They were the pros. They had done this all night and hadn't had any luck, and they have a carpenter telling them where to fish and how to fish. But they pay attention, they throw the nets over, and they witness this amazing miracle. They were the experts, far more experienced than Jesus. But what we find at times that experience isn't always the best teacher. You go to Las Vegas or somewhere and you play the roulette wheel and it lands on black 9 times in a row. What's it going to land on next? Black, right? It doesn't always. But in life, we walk through life that way. It's happened this way over and over and over in this relationship, or it's happened this way over and over for me. And so that's my experience. And I think that's going to keep happening. And I continue to struggle. I continue to miss something. Well, it's the type of experience that matters. What kind of experience do you have in the area that you feel like you're missing? You know, the smartest people in any room typically know how to identify what seems to be missing, to see what isn't in plain sight, to see the fish below the surface. In 2008, Malcolm Gladwell came out with a book called Outliers. How many of you read Outliers? A few of us. He came up with the rule of 10,000 hours. Have you heard that? He says that it takes 10,000 hours of intensive practice to achieve mastery of complex skills and materials. 10,000 hours to become an expert. Some of us feel like we put in the 10,000 hours and we're still not expert. We're still looking for that little missing piece. We don't feel quite as effective as we'd like. We still struggle in relationships. We still have heartache. We still have things that we feel like maybe if we found that missing piece, it wouldn't be quite so difficult. Well, experience, it also depends on resources. Are there people around you that have the 10,000 hours that you could go to? The fishermen thought they needed another boat. They needed other resources. Like in Jaws, they needed a bigger boat. Where are those resources for us that we go to when we're struggling or we're trying to find that missing piece? It may not be discoverable by you alone. Maybe there are other people who are those experts. Because there's always great value in being able to see beneath the surface. Let's get back to the boat. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." You'll fish for people. Don't be afraid. You have just crossed over into a world of possibilities, Simon, and world of resources unlike anything you've ever experienced. You've seen an amazing miracle, but remember, the miracle wasn't the fish, it was Jesus. The miracle is always Jesus. When he says, "You'll fish for people," my assumption is, I don't know how it could be anything but Peter and them to look at him and say, "What are you talking about? We have no idea what you're talking about. We know how to fish for fish, but this doesn't make any sense at all." But you know what they did? They pulled their boats on shore. They left everything and followed him. Because it wasn't about the miracle, it was about Jesus. How do we do that? We're wandering and looking around. We're trying to find that Waldo in our life, that little missing piece. And we realize that at times we can't see love through the fog of pain and disappointment. Those bumps and bruises in life that are painful and hurt. And it's hard to see love. It's fogged over. It's hard to see love when life experiences have let us down, that our expectations have been unmet. Maybe that relationship hasn't meant all you wanted it to mean. Maybe your career wasn't all you would like. Maybe you haven't lived your best life. And it's hard to see love when everything is fogged over by pain and disappointment. Sometimes we can't tap courage because the weakness comes from failure and loss. That failure, that fishing all night, pulling those all-nighters and still failing and not finding a way to success. Back in college, we pull the all-nighters before the test. We'd cram everything in and go in and take the test. But there was one class that I didn't have to cram for. One class that I never pulled an all-nighter for because the professor had this philosophy. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He would send you the test. You would take the test and turn it in. You'd get a grade back. You'd see what you missed. But when you graded, you also put in the correct answers. And then he let you take the test again. He said, "My goal is not to grade you or find out what you don't know. My goal is for you to learn the information. And if I give it back to you and you come and you answer everything correctly, you've learned it and I will give you that grade." No all-nighters for that. So there are missing pieces at times, that missing answer, and it fills in and we can learn it. But failure sometimes is difficult to find courage once again, to sit down at that test again and to walk through that again. Also, we have extraordinary losses at times, and some of us feel like we're going to lose over and over and over again, and eventually we're going to feel broke and empty. I introduced Ted Lasso to you guys a couple of months ago, and many of you blamed me for your fee you've been having to pay to Apple Plus for that since that time. Last Friday's episode was a great one again, and at one point Ted Lasso is talking to the team that continues to lose. But he talks to them with such optimism and belief because he knows how to believe in the face of consistent loss. It's hard to find courage to continue to believe when we consistently lose, but that's difficult. Something else, it's hard to find compassion that is clouded by fatigue and skepticism. With everything going on in the world, I don't know about you, but I'm really tired. I feel fatigued by what's happened around us and what we've all experienced. I'm tired and weary, but I'm also skeptical of people like I've never been before. I've seen people take positions on certain things, on the vaccine and other things that it just makes me question people that I never questioned before. People's intentions, people's lack of confidence in that we can make a difference. Well, there's an elephant in the room, and I'm going to address it. I have an op-ed article written by a doctor that was posted in the LA Times on August 17th by Dr. Anita Sarkar. So take a moment, so bear with me. My patient sat on the edge of his bed, gasping for air while he tried to tell me a story, pausing to catch his breath after each word. The plastic tubes delivering oxygen through his nose hardly seemed adequate to stop his chest from heaving. Fearing his symptoms were worsening, he started taking some hydrochloroquine he had found on the internet. It didn't work. He was a shell of his former self. He eventually made his way to a facility where he could receive monoclonal antibodies that a lab produced. He finally ended up in the ER with dangerously low oxygen levels. Nothing had helped. He could not breathe. His wife and 2 young children were at home, all infected with the virus. He and his wife had decided not to get vaccinated. Last year, a case like this would have flattened me. I would have wrestled with the sadness and how unfair life was. I would have battled with the angst of how unlucky he was. This year, I struggled to find sympathy. Cutting-edge, revolutionary, mind-blowing, life-saving vaccines were available where people shopped for groceries, and they still didn't want them. Outside his hospital door, I took a deep breath, battening down my anger and frustration, and went in. I've been working with COVID-19 units for 17 months straight, all day, every day. I cared for hundreds of COVID patients. We all had, without being able to take breaks long enough to help us recover from this unending ordeal. Compassion fatigue was setting in. For those of us who hadn't left their hardest jobs of the year, even hope was now in short supply. Shouting through my N95 mask and the noise of the HEPA filter, I introduced myself, and I calmly asked why he decided not to get vaccinated. Well, I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anything. I was just waiting for the FDA to approve the vaccine first. I didn't want to take anything experimental. I didn't want to be the government's guinea pig, and I don't trust that it's safe. Well, I said, I can pretty much guarantee we would have never met had you gotten vaccinated because you would have never been hospitalized. All of our COVID units are full, and every single patient in them is unvaccinated. Numbers don't lie. The vaccines work. This was a common excuse for people not getting vaccinated, fearing that the vaccine, because the FDA had granted it only emergency use authorization so far, not permanent approval. Yet the treatments he had turned to, antibiotics, monoclonal antibodies, and hydrochloroquine, were considered experimental with mixed evidence to support their use. The only proven lifesaver we've had in this pandemic is a vaccine that many people don't want. A vaccine we give away to other countries because supply overwhelms demand in the U.S. A vaccine people in other countries stand in line for hours to receive if they can get it at all. Well, I said, I'm going to treat you with remdesivir, which has only recently been approved by the FDA. Yes, he responded, whatever it takes to save my life. It did not work. My patient died 9 days later of a stroke. We, the care team, reconciled this loss by telling ourselves he made a personal choice not to get vaccinated, not to protect himself or his family. We did everything we could with what we had to save him. This year, this tragedy, this unnecessary, entirely preventable loss was on him. Vaccination is a deeply personal choice, but perhaps never in history has anyone's personal choice affected the world as a whole as it does right now. When hundreds and thousands of people continue to die, when the most vulnerable members of our society, our children, cannot be vaccinated, the luxury of choice ceases to exist. If you yourself believe I won't get my children vaccinated because I don't know what the long-term effects will be. It matters little if they don't live long enough for you to find out. It's hard to have compassion. We have fatigue. We've grown skeptical. But we must sometimes muster strength, and often we can't. We can't muster the strength for the grace that's needed with others. We can't find the grace for things that offend us and people that offend us. Let me ask a couple of questions. What words offend you? What views offend you? What behaviors offend you? Now, what popped in your head, all of those things say more about you than they do the offenders, and that's not all bad. Sometimes being offended and taking offense is appropriate and good, and sometimes it's called for. But either way, we're called to offer grace. That would take a miracle. But remember, the miracle wasn't the fish, it was Jesus. Why does that make such a difference? For the Spirit of God gave us, does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. It's about Jesus. This is what we get with Jesus. Not a miracle load of fish, but we get Him. We get power that gives us the strength to offer grace when we don't feel gracious. We get love to help find the love that lifts the fog of pain and disappointment, unveils the compassion that changes us. With Jesus, we get self-discipline to be able to tap the courage needed to press on from failure and loss. The tin man thought he was missing a heart, when all along he was caring and thoughtful and compassionate and kind. Sometimes we feel like something's missing and we want to see a miracle like the fisherman with Jesus. But remember, the miracle wasn't the fish. It was Jesus. They left everything and followed Him. Follow Him and love will come. Follow Him and you'll find courage. Follow Him and you'll be capable of compassion to the worst and the least in the world. Follow Him and you'll muster the strength for grace. The fisherman didn't have any idea how to fish for people. The tin man didn't know how to find a heart. And there are times when you and I may not know how to love. We don't know how to be courageous. We don't know how to be compassionate or to live with grace. But at the end of the day, when everything's said and done, it's about following Jesus. So pull your boat to the shore, leave your ways behind, and follow Him. Amen.